to the Warriors in Business podcast. Today, we are honored and privileged to be joined by Adam Hahn. Adam is a military veteran and active first responder, along with being an entrepreneur. And we're excited to speak with him today to ask him about his time in the military and how he transitioned from the military to civilian life, which eventually led him to becoming an entrepreneur. And so we're going to ask him some questions about his business, pick his brain about how he started his business, how he scaled it, made it grow, and some things he would love to pass on to his fellow military, veteran, and first responder peers. So without further ado, Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thank you, Jordan, for that introduction. I sure appreciate that.
Hey, absolutely. By the way, Jordan, I'm cool. We get a 2-for-1 today, both military veteran and a first responder too, so that's going to be interesting to hear how this goes. Look forward to it. Welcome, Adam, and thank you for your service.
Thanks, Todd.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, that was Todd is my co-host for the Warriors in Business podcast here. And so we are going to talk to Adam today about a couple of things. First and foremost, Adam, we want to say thank you for your service to our country, to our communities, to keep us all safe and free. We are beyond blessed and grateful for your sacrifice to our country. So let's dive into it. Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal story and your service background?
Sure. Well, I appreciate everything, Jordan and Todd. Thanks for having me here today. I'm a pretty simple guy, just like most of you that may be listening today. I'm a young businessman, a husband and a father and a Christ follower. I was in the military from 2010 through 2014, but prior to that military service, I was in the first responder realm, went through school to be a firefighter, and now I'm currently a volunteer firefighter for our local community here in Fredericksburg. Growing up, I grew up in Fredericksburg where you're kind of expected to do one job your whole life, and you grow up, you get taught a trade, you do that trade, and that's just what you do. You find what's secure and you go after it, and that's really all that you do. You don't really take the big risks that business owners and people in life take. And part of that led me through college to where I really didn't enjoy what I was doing there, going to school. And I decided after not doing so well in college and jumping into the firefighting profession that I needed more excitement and something a little bit more enjoyable to do in my life. And that led me to the United States Air Force. In 2010, I joined the United States Air Force. I got into the intel sector and worked initially at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. It's kind of funny when you go into the military, that's where you start basic training, and nobody really ever expects to go back there to do their service. But I ended up back at Lackland Air Force Base up on Security Hill in the SCIF, which is a secret compartmentalized information facility where you do a lot of higher end stuff. Spent several deployments in Afghanistan and in other regions, which was a very enjoyable time. You have some of your best times and your worst times when you serve overseas. When I was overseas, I worked primarily with combat engineers, the Red Horse and Prime Beef, and was part of the group that established the first ECG, which was the Expeditionary Civil Engineer Group, and that was stationed in Qatar at Al Udeid Air Base. So there were a lot of really incredible and unique missions that we were part of, and a lot of cool things that we did as a unit and as a team when I was serving.
That's awesome. By the way, I've got to ask you, intelligence, that all sounds great. Thank you for that service and that information. Is there any juicy intelligence you can share with us or the audience? Or
yes, I was about to ask this.
Yeah, just got to throw it out there. I got to throw it out there.
Juicy intel. If I shared much of that information, I'd probably get hunted down by the government and probably not be sitting here to enjoy another podcast down the road. I guess one of the fun things that I was part of, I worked with a part of a sector where they did document destruction. So you basically run it through, and it's called a big burn machine. When you think about that, you think of it going through and burning all the documents and so forth. But it was actually just a
Oh,
gigantic
wow.
shredder where they'd go in and they would pulverize the documents that had been pushed through and turned into dust, basically. It was pretty neat to be able to see what happens to those documents that aren't allowed to be seen anymore and are no longer needed. It was pretty neat to see how those documents were destroyed after they were no longer needed.
So what you're saying is you're not going to tell us squat and you have to kill us. You're not going to give us anything juicier than that, even though that's a really freaking cool story.
That is cool.
That's right.
Our job is to press. Right. Okay, we're not going to get anything out of him. He's tight-lipped, Jordan. He's tight-lipped, so I don't want to interrupt, but we can keep moving on. Thanks for that information, Adam.
Oh, no, that's great. No, that was great to hear. Thanks, Adam. So then at the moment you had transitioned from the military to civilian life, I guess we can call that a watershed moment. You had a couple of choices. One, perhaps to retire a quote-unquote wealthy young man, because everyone who retires from the military is super wealthy coming out of that. Either that or becoming an employee, or deciding to be an entrepreneur and to become self-employed. So obviously you chose the latter route of entrepreneur. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about that? What led you to deciding to become a business owner yourself?
For sure. So when I got out of the military, I actually didn't immediately take the entrepreneurial route. It kind of reverted back to what I was taught growing up as to you needed to get a job and just kind of focus on that job. So I found an individual who was interested in, at one point, letting me partner in on a business with him. So I decided to go ahead and jump in full force with him out in West Texas in the oil service industry. Started sinking a lot of money into the business with promises of being a business owner and being able to do what we are called the American dream of owning your own business and being able to live your life in your own terms and your own means. But what I quickly found was as I was working through that process of working for somebody else, I didn't have the same drive and aspirations as the business owner did. What I quickly realized was the majority of my peers and those around me didn't seem to have the same ambitions and drive around business and life as I did. I had a tremendous amount of loyalty to the career that I had chosen to jump into after the military service, but the leadership team didn't have those same core values. And what that did was it basically led me into a point to where I was working for a company that was run more like a dictatorship. There was no structure. The company pushed me into a position of feeling very vulnerable as a person for my family, to where I didn't know if I was financially going to be able to support them, and eventually ended up pushing me out of that position and not being able to support my family and do what I needed to do as a man to live my life and really give my family what they deserved or needed on a spiritual or physical or financial way of life. So
right.
that was kind of the turning point for me in my business. I decided that point I didn't want anybody else having my fate or my financial security in their hands. I wanted to take that over into my own control and into my own hands. And that's really what got me on the path of entrepreneurship, was that experience that I had with this company that I worked for directly out of the military.
So I'm going to jump in. So the path to entrepreneurship that you were just talking about, Adam, I've, for the last 30 years, I've dealt with literally thousands, probably 15,000, small, medium-sized business owners around the country. And one of the most common things for all entrepreneurs, not just military veteran and first responder entrepreneurs, but pretty much all of them have a common theme of a struggle and a challenge. And I want to ask you if you had this, if you went through this process, and then I'll ask you something on top of that too, to maybe share with the audience. And that struggle is steady paycheck versus generating income yourself, right? So as someone who needs to, as we, need to cover our household expenses to make sure our family's taken care of, going the employee route is that steadiness. And I think you kind of mentioned that, kind of the way that, your community was, and kind of the way the thought process was amongst yourself and the people around you. But then you wanted something more. You were more ambitious, let's just say, than the crowd maybe that was around you. So can you share anything about, internally, like with your spouse or your family or your own personal thoughts, or what that was going through your mind about, okay, how am I going to take the risk and go create something for myself through entrepreneurship, or am I going to get the steady paycheck and make sure that, that we don't have that as much financial stress, because there's going to be some kind of time frame before you can build income. And on top of that, sorry to be a long-winded question here, but on top of that also, because you came out and transitioned out of the military and became a veteran and went through and were a first responder, went through training with that, are there any additional struggles or challenges because of coming out of structured military or something like that, on top of the steady paycheck challenge that I've always heard about over the last 30 years?
For sure. Well, that's a great question, Todd. The steady paycheck was definitely a difficult thing to overcome, because you get so used to knowing that on the 1st and the 15th, you were going to have that auto draft into your account. Even though it was such a small amount, you knew that whether you were on leave or whether you were at work, or the amount of hours you put in on the 1st and the 15th of every month without fail, that money was going to be in your account. So there was a very, very strong sense of security of knowing that if you could set a budget and just live within your means of what you were making in the military, which was very little, you were going to be able to survive to a point. I think outweighing what was being paid to me versus the risk of getting after it to generate the income needed to replace that steady paycheck outweighed the fear that I had of not being secure, knowing that a paycheck was going to come every other week. Knowing that you have a paycheck certainly makes life easier. But when that paycheck covers the expenses that you have, it's still very stressful, and you still have a very large amount of insecurity with it, because you can't do anything else. You can't go out to dinner. You can't take your kids to the grocery store and splurge on that candy bar as you're walking through the aisle that every kid's going to ask for.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be standing there, and they're going to say, "Hey, I really want that Snickers bar," and you're going to have to tell them every single time, "Sorry, I'm on a tight budget. I can't afford that." And that motivation for me way outweighed the fear of not having that steady paycheck. So I always had my why in place, which I think is most important for people when they're starting their own business and when they truly want to create their own financial security, is having a good why attached to it. And that why for me was my family, because I knew what the financial struggle felt like. I knew I didn't want that anymore. And I didn't want that for them, especially. So I lived my life on driving so hard to be able to generate the income I needed so that the no's became way less frequent and the yeses became a lot more. So that's why it wasn't as, to me, I think that was what made giving up that steady paycheck much easier than being attached to the fear of not knowing where it was going to come from initially when we first got started.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And before Jordan moves to the next question, I will just share that, what you said, I've heard thousands of times, and that is that delicate balancing act, from entrepreneurship versus the steady paycheck, and I kind of tell people, there's no such thing as a steady paycheck anymore. And unfortunately in today's world, not like our grandparents, worked at a company for 40 years and that doesn't exist anymore. But there is some security in that until it's not there. So it's a personal choice. And the reason why that phrase is a key phrase for entrepreneurship, and what I've found over the years is that, that reason why has to outweigh. It's like a scale tipping right or left, and it has to tip one way or the other. It has to tip the way for entrepreneurs. It has to tip the way that the potential rewards, outweighs that the steady security, side of things on a paycheck. And it's pretty fascinating, to hear you say that. And we appreciate your honesty. I know the audience will appreciate your honesty too, because, a lot of the people that will be listening to this, are going to be aspiring entrepreneurs, veterans transitioning out of the military, first responders transitioning out of their career and, ready to do something else. And they're going to be at that watershed moment in their life of, okay, what do I do? Do I go get a paycheck, or do I take the risk or the risks, I should say, to open up their own business? And that's why, that's part of one of the main reasons why we created this podcast is, again, share stories from individuals like you who are, kind enough to share their personal stories with us and information and challenges. And so we hope that, your words will encourage our audience. So on that note, Jordan, we'll go ahead and keep it going for your next question.
Yeah, Adam, thank you for all that. So that actually leads very well into the next point of discussion. So, Adam, you were telling us how you at first started out as an employee of a different company that wasn't structured well, didn't provide the most security that you were looking for, and prompted you to want to make a change. So tell us about that transition from being an employee to now then becoming an entrepreneur and running the business that you do now.
So really, it wasn't much of a transition out. It was more of a kick in the rear right out of the door, because the business that I was part of was going under, and I just got booted out. So I got left into a pretty dire strait of not having really any money to do anything, and it was a do or die situation. You either get you a job real quick, or you figure it out and decide that you're going to create your own path. And that outweighed my desire to go get another job for somebody else and be in that situation again. So I jumped into the real estate market immediately, right after that experience. I decided to go ahead and get my real estate license quickly, so that my wife was already selling real estate, and it was a good opportunity for us to create our own team and to work side by side with one another. That was something that we had always wanted.
Very cool.
When I was in the
cool,
military.
But dangerous sometimes.
It is. It can be a dangerous combo, especially when you're conquering the world like my wife
Just
and I
thought I'd throw that in there.
But it was one of those transitions that we had always talked about doing something together, because when I was in the military, I was gone all the time. I spent a lot of time away from home. And
good point.
I wanted to be able to spend more time with her and with our kids. And even with this business that I jumped into outside of the military as a civilian, it still had me away from home, where I was only home maybe 3 to 6 days a month. So I was still living that away life.
Oh, wow.
It was time for me to spend time at home and really accomplish that other goal that I wanted, which was freedom to be with my family. So we jumped into the real estate realm, and as we were growing the real estate business, there was a need for us on the marketing side of the house for photography, video production, and really getting our name out there on marketing efforts. So as most entrepreneurs, they always try to find ways to solve solutions that they have within their own businesses as well. So we decided to start a photography and video production, which was called Wingman Imagery. As you would imagine, being a military man, you always have your wingman with you. So Wingman was the real estate partner.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That is cool.
We decided to create that business to offset the cost that we were spending on marketing efforts, and then keep that as full circle into our own circle of life, create our own vision of what we could be through real estate, photography, and video production and marketing efforts. So that ended up getting me into the photography and video production with Wingman Imagery, and that was in 2017 when I started it, and it's still growing and doing well. A lot of great things happening with that company, and really outside of growing that business, it was a lot of fun. There's certainly some scary times. Some of the challenges, especially when you get started in a business like that, coming out of the military, there's some serious struggles that a lot of military members have because we're not very good at simple communication. And that may seem odd for a lot of
You
individuals
mean
who have
just,
never
What
been
do you
in.
mean?
what do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is in simple communication is service members are generally trained to communicate consistently directly with specific jargon. So we communicate in a way that uses lots of acronyms, lots of directness, a lot of very abrupt conversation because when you're in a deployed environment, there's no room for, hey, would you mind going and doing it? It's, hey, I need you to do this and I need you to do this right now. And there's a lot of directness to it. So being
Like,
able
shut
to
up,
absolutely.
clean my
And
boots.
yeah,
Uh,
let's get this done. Like this, we have no time to sit around and chit chat about the pointless things of life. We've got work to do. And
yeah.
that was a
Right.
difficult thing when you're bringing in employees and you're trying to have those conversations with them, but be compassionate in a way that it fills other people's cups instead of just you driving the mission down deep because that's what your
I
job
see.
is. You wonder. So that simple communication that we were trained to just get things done and be very direct and to the point. And it's the same way in the fire service. When you're on the fire line and you have an emergency going on, there's really no room for being indirect. You've got to be very direct so that the point gets across immediately, clearly, and you can get the job done quickly and efficiently and effectively. So that was certainly a challenge, having that communication key.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was something that you learned over time and, probably through trial and error. Were there other perhaps resources or things that you sought out to help you in that particular realm, just
On
as a business owner?
communication, really on the communication side, it was more just a lot of networking and surrounding yourselves with other business owners. Toastmasters is an organization that you go and you learn how to speak in front of people effectively and communicate properly. Uh, Rotary International, places and court networks that will allow you to speak more and you listen to a lot of people and the way they talk and the way they communicate with one another. And then you implement that and follow those steps and those plans to make it part of your life.
You said Toastmasters and Rotary International.
Yeah, those were two big ones.
Do they serve toast at Toastmasters? I don't know why I have this image of you walk in and there's just like plates of toast everywhere and butter
Plates
and
of
all the
toast.
fixings.
No,
I don't know.
unfortunately, no, we didn't get to chew on much toast.
Just a fun thought there. So, okay, you had mentioned for your real estate business that you developed in-house marketing efforts that was photography, and so you innovated in your own business. From those efforts, would you say that grew your business exponentially after that? How would you describe the growth of your business because of innovation that you did yourself with that?
We definitely grew a lot due to the innovations that we put into our business. Over the course of the last 7 years, the first 2 years we grew by 25 to 40%. The last couple years have been 50% growth year after year since 2020, since the pandemic hit. We've grown by 50% each year, which is incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Especially in
Good
the
for you.
times a lot of people were having. It was, I feel for those, but it was a good opportunity for a lot of us to take leadership opportunities and market share and growth while other people were freaking out and running around with their heads chopped off.
Right.
Okay, so I got to jump in here. You mentioned that, and those are some great, interesting statistics, and congrats on that because not everyone can, say that kind of story. So, are there any things that you can share with the audience? Like, if you were to take a maybe the top two, or just a few highlights of what successful strategies were you guys doing in order to get that kind of growth, especially during some of the most challenging economic times we've seen, and let's just say many, many, many years?
Sure. So some of the strategies that we were doing was we were spending more dollars on marketing efforts where people were starting to cut back on what they were putting out there. We were doubling down. So the more people pulled back, the more we put in. And we started looking at problems that needed to be solved and solving those bigger problems because when the pandemic hit, a lot of problems were happening. A lot of people were having issues.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as people have issues, your financial gain is congruent to the problems you solve. And if you solve big problems, your financial reward typically is pretty big. If you solve small problems, your financial reward is usually pretty small. So
Good point.
when you're in a world that's going through times and everybody's worried and freaking out, you just need to find those problems and then go solve them.
So, Adam, we've talked about a lot of different things from your service background to transitioning out of the military to civilian life and the journey that you've been on from employee to business owner, and then the success that you have seen from innovating within your own company to increase your own marketing efforts. What other advice would you give to aspiring military, veteran, first responder business owners, those that are looking to launch their own business, pursue their own dreams? What advice would you give to them specifically as someone who is a military veteran and active first responder?
Yeah, and by the way, Adam, I'm going to jump in and make it even tougher on you, my friend.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, here we are, because those are great. That's a great question, because think about the people that are listening, again, transitioning out of a career. Maybe they've just gotten laid off. Maybe they've just transitioned out of the military, out of a first responder position, whatever it may be. It could be any, just someone's at that watershed or a pivotal moment in their life. But on top of that, okay, and you've got experience going through the whole, COVID craziness, but now from, at the time of this recording, let's just say we are, we don't want to get political here, but let's just say the economy is tough. So, add on top of that, what can you share? And would you even, if you were talking to someone sitting in a coffee shop that was in this position, what would you be sharing with him or her, and whether or not they should launch it or what they should be thinking about it, doing
Absolutely.
that during this economic time we're in today?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, and this has been proven time and time again, especially throughout the last recession, more millionaires are made when a time like right now happens. Whether you want to be one of those individuals or not is up to that individual person and whether they have the grit want to make it happen. But what I can say is right now has never been a better time to become an entrepreneur, because now is the time when real leaders are born, when real millionaires are born that build true long-term generational wealth during these times. When times are good, like in 2020, when I understand the pandemic happened, but when 2020 happened and people were truly just raking in cash, a lot of people, and even before that, that wasn't the time when you truly grow as an entrepreneur and make all of your wealth. It's when the times are low is when you can gain market share. And once you gain market share, it's hard for people to get it back from you. And the best time to gain market share of any is when it's low.
Yeah. And that's, that's the exact opposite of what most people think, by the way. So that's good words of advice from someone who's done it and doing it. But that is a 180 change of what most people think, of how most people think, because everyone thinks, well, the economy's retracting, so therefore we must retract, right? You see the layoffs of all of these fintech companies and social media platforms and all of that. So, but those are great words of advice. I've got to ask you something personal. Okay, you ready for this one? Because this is going to be one that's going to, resonate with, possibly roughly half of our audience. And that is, let's say a spouse wants to go the entrepreneurial route and they want to start their business and they want to jump in feet first and they want to take control of their own financial, security and destiny, let's call it, for them and their family. But they're married and they have to get their spouse on board. Without getting too personal, how did that process go to have that personal conversation? Because I know from experience, and I know from experience firsthand from hundreds of entrepreneurs of the thousands that I've dealt with over the last 30 years, that's a very difficult conversation, a very difficult process, because the spouse oftentimes wants security, and we all totally understand that. Everyone wants security to an extent, but it's a choice. At the end of the day, life is full of choices, and this is a big choice because we spend so much of our time in our professional part of our life. So how do you navigate? What would you share again with a buddy or a friend, sitting there, contemplating going into business for themselves? They're married, and now they've got to go have that, air quotes, fun conversation with their spouse to see if they can get, both on board. Do they do it no matter what the spouse says? Do they have to, get them in agreement? Like, what advice would you give for that conversation?
Sure. So that's tough. That's a tough question, Todd. I was fortunate because my wife supported me very much in anything that I've ever wanted to do. She's always had my back and was willing to support me in anything I wanted to try. So I've been very fortunate there. However, I have helped many other business owners, men and women, have those types of conversations with their spouses. And really, my advice has always been, tell them what your desires are and let them know that you have a plan. And if they truly have faith in you and love you as their spouse, that they are bound and wed to you for, then they're going to believe that you are going to do what you say you're going to do. And then your job now is to go do exactly what you say you're going to do and prove to them that you're not feeding them full of a bunch of BS, and that you can truly accomplish the things that you're telling them that you're going to accomplish. As a man, your job is to support your family and your wife. At least in my opinion, that's how I feel. And there's a lot of women out there that are going to go out there and crush it too. But as a man, I believe that you need to go out there and truly do what you say you're going to do every single time. And especially when you tell your family something, if you promise them something, make a promise to your spouse and your children, and then just stick to that promise, and they will have no reason not to believe in you.
Yeah.
Well, that's great advice, because I do actually know someone right now and it's flipped around the other side. The wife is the one that's wanting to start her own business, and the husband was not receptive to it. So it's, frustrating to hear, and I feel sorry for her, but I think she's working on him to try to bring him around. But I think at the end of the day, for what it's worth, and my 2 cents is, it is a much higher probability of being successful knowing that you got the full support of your spouse, and hopefully the, husband and wife can work together to do that, to be able to support each other on that, and maybe even set terms, as in, okay, I will 1,000% support you, and if you think it's going to take, I'm making up an arbitrary number, 12 months to ramp this up, then by golly, we're going to buckle down for 12 months and we're going to do this. But if it's 3 years, if all of a sudden 18 months goes by, we're going to have another conversation probably before that 18 months hits. I mean, do you think something like that, setting boundaries like that, or a time frame, a reasonable time frame that both can agree on, is that something that you think would make sense for couples?
Yes, absolutely. And I was actually going to mention that, because setting a realistic goal, and realistic is the key term there. You can't say, hey, I'm going to start this business and in 5 months, I'm going to be making $100,000 a month or anything crazy there. You've got to be realistic, because when you tell your spouse something, they take that as your word. And if you tell them you're going to start something and it's only going to take you 2 months to get it launched, or 3 months to get it launched, and then it takes you 6 or 8, then that 4 to 5 month period of time in between of when you promised them it was going to happen, there's a lot of resentment and doubt starting to flow in. And there's no room for that in business, because when you start losing your spouse's support because you promised them something and then you don't keep your word, then it starts getting really difficult. Because I've been there. I've done that. And it's not a good place to be. You have to keep your word.
Yeah. And just to be clear, this is something that's, it's tough for not only, married couples, it's also for, the single adults and even divorced, couples, and where mothers are supporting their children, and we're going to have all kind of podcasts and different scenarios with different backgrounds and different people that we look forward to, interviewing them too in the future on these types of things, to represent the general public out there. So we look forward to doing that as well too. Okay, we just wanted to just kind of in closing remarks, I just wanted to ask, for the, obviously again, thanks for joining this Warriors and Business podcast, but for the Bravery Marketplace, and for those who are going to either already know about it or about to find out about what the Bravery Marketplace is on our joinbravery.com site, I know that you know what it is. You're a MVFR, we affectionately call military veteran first responder business owners MVFR business owners, and as one, what we learned early on is that the majority of the public would choose or would want to choose to do business with individuals like yourself who've served our country and want to support you through their purchases of products and services that that you offer. Just what is your honest opinion, good, bad, or indifferent? I'm putting you on the spot. What do you think of the overall concept of the Bravery Marketplace? And is that something that you think you as a business owner and your fellow peer MVFR business owners would see value in that?
Absolutely. Well, that's a great question, Todd. I think it's an amazing platform. I think it's a place for us veterans and first responders to get together and truly lean on one another. The support that we give each other, once you get out of the military, kind of starts to fade away. And being able to have a network where you can truly support other business owners who are just like you, who want to give back to our community, it's just truly incredible. And I'm super excited about the concept and what you guys have put together, because it's really going to change the course of MVFRs, military veteran first responder business owners, and just communities in general. It's going to touch a lot of people's lives.
Oh, hey, we appreciate that. Appreciate those comments. By the way, we just did, we talked to a lot of people. We've been doing that for the last 2 years through surveys and through personal conversations. And literally hot off the press 2 weeks ago, we just did another survey, and we got back that from the general population, this is a cool stat because this has been going up over the last 2 years. When we ask one of the main questions, if you had an opportunity, you as a consumer, Jane and John Doe consumer, if you had the opportunity to buy products or services from an MVFR, military veteran or first responder business owner, would you do that? Or would you proactively do that? And that actually went up. It was a 74% yes. That's the highest one that we've seen since we've been going down this journey the last couple of years, when we started launching, preparing to launch this marketplace and this podcast too. So anyway, that's an astounding, basically 3 out of 4 people would do it. So they want to know who Adam is and what he sells and where he finds you. And in fact, so that's something that I think was a cool stat, a strong stat, and that kind of validates, the Bravery Marketplace and the whole idea. But thank you again for your comments. Any final words from you, Jordan?
Final words are actually, I'm going to hand it back over to Adam. Adam, this is your chance and opportunity to plug your business. If people are interested in seeking you out, how and where can they find you? Website, social media, where can they find you?
For sure. I wanted to, real quick, if you don't mind, jump back into one thing when you had asked about what I would share with the fellow MVFR business owners to help them in their business efforts. And then we kind of jumped into the spouse conversation, but never really answered that question. One thing that I would like to address there is for any MVFR business owner who's wanting to get into business or is there and needs some advice, I would say definitely lean into growing a network of people that surround you, because when you are in the military and as a first responder, you go through so much, but really what the military and first responders are teaching you is how to be resilient. You plan a mission and then you execute that mission, but nothing ever really goes according to plan. Your job is to continue to lead in non-ideal circumstances at all costs.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
point.
no, that's great to hear.
And I just think that's super important for people just to keep pushing forward and not let circumstances get them down, because you were trained to do what you need to do in non-ideal circumstances all the time. It's just now your chance to do it in the civilian sector.
Right. And a lot of times it takes a village in order to make that happen. So the networking, seems like an incredible way to push forward even when things don't go to plan.
Kind of like I've always told my kids, surround yourself with people that will lift you up and not bring you down, right? That's got your back, support you, like-minded, like values, people that will put deposits in your life instead of withdrawals. And I think that's, I'm just kind of paraphrasing, but I totally understand that, as a business person myself, and as a husband and a father as well too. So I think that is absolutely spot on. So great point. Thanks for sharing that, Adam.
You're welcome. And if anybody's looking to get in touch with me, I'm the owner of Bear Creek Construction. It's a general contracting company here in Fredericksburg, Texas. We offer all of the hill country. You can find us at Bear Creek Construction or bearcreekbld.com. And then you can also find us if you need help selling any properties, large, small ranches, houses, luxury, small, nice, not. You can find my wife, Katie Hahn, and myself. We're with Portfolio Real Estate, Keller Williams, out of San Antonio and Fredericksburg, Texas. And our team is called Oak and Stone Property Group.
So last question, do you have any really nice, cool houses for like $25,000?
If I did, I would probably already own them.
Never hurts to ask. If you don't ASK, you don't GET. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Awesome.
Oh, definitely. And for our audience listening, the information that Adam just gave regarding his businesses and where to find them, we will list that in the description. Adam, thanks again for joining us on this episode of Warriors in Business. We enjoyed talking with you today about your business, about your service background, and want to thank you once again for your service to our country, to our communities, to keep us all safe and free. It was a genuine pleasure and honor to talk to you today.
Yes, it was. I second that, my friend. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Todd. I appreciate you guys.
In my bones, rising up and taking control, like a sickness running through my veins. It's a force that's pulling on the reins. My